Hey guys, I was playing in some pub lobbies on Twitch when I noticed some players are running some less than optimal sets. Not as in they do not have the decorations to make something work, but as in their build is going to be creating suboptimal playstyles in the long term. Primarily, these suboptimal playstyles can stem from investment into defensive options that do not complement the weapon later on. To stay on brand, I will release a video as a resource about current meta playstyles and defensive options for players to refer to if they wish to improve their damage and maybe even their survivability. As an added note, these videos are meant for players hoping to push themselves as they approach endgame, but these defensive options are something players can look into investing some decoration slots towards, so that they can smoothly transition from comfort sets towards more damage-oriented sets. If you're having trouble completing any hunts or are learning hunts, I highly recommend investing points into Divine Blessing and ensuring you have health boost maxed if you do not have a 4-piece Fatalis set. These defensive options can be used in all armor sets in place of damage, and they can be swapped back in for additional damage later on. For the most part, defense boost is very inefficient, as damage reduction gained from the defense increases can be better spent putting some points into recovery up and having a health regen augment. Unless you're running a Gigacopium set and you plan on getting out DPS'd by a Palico, don't use defense boost. You have enough defensive layers through other methods. Let's start off with the Greatsword. The Greatsword meta currently revolves around hit and run setups that focus on the Arch-Tempered Velkhana Frostcraft set. To best accommodate for this playstyle, players should be getting used to Quick Sheath. In addition, if they are interested in tackling monster attacks, you can take advantage of Health Augment to tackle through an attack, then hit the monster with a Charge Slash while retaining full health afterward. Since you're very vulnerable while charging attacks, investing in the focus skill can speed up your charges, serving as both an offensive and defensive option. In my opinion, I find Evade Extender unnecessary, but I can see its utility when 1 or 2 points invested in to avoid some wide sweeping attacks if you're a little slow on timing attacks or need to get the extra oomph in your rolls while your weapon is sheathed. Some players may notice I do not mention the guard skill and the fact that Greatsword can guard most monster attacks. It's not good, because you have no follow-ups coming out of a well-timed guard. You should use it as a last resort. Since it is used as a last resort, putting guard skills and offensive guard in is inefficient. The Sword and Shield is the next weapon. Strangely enough, I see a lot of people categorize the Sword and Shield as a versatile weapon, capable of both guard-based playstyles as well as evasion-based playstyles. However, similar to the Greatsword, the weapon lacks any offensive options coming out of guarding. I guess it is possible to use offensive guard in order to gain a damage boost on some attacks, but we're not talking about viable strategies. We're talking about how to optimize your defenses and damage skills. Since the Iceborne expansion, the evasion playstyle has become even stronger, giving the Sword and Shield access to Perfect Rush coming out of the backsteps. Since Perfect Rush is by far the most powerful tool in the Sword and Shield's kit, using guard-related skills quickly take a backseat in favor of evasion-based playstyles. Thankfully, Evade Extender works on both the backstep and the leap forward, so you can freely adjust your jump distance depending on the matchup or your preference. Following the SNS is the Dual Blades. This weapon is very obvious. Without any guard options, you need to use Evade Window and Evade Extender to maximize your survivability. If you feel like you aren't dashing far enough, you can always slot an Evade Extender, but it shouldn't make too much difference if you have a good understanding of fight tempo and positioning. One thing I can add is the use of stamina management skills. Since you require stamina to both attack and dodge, a few stamina management skills will be crucial in your survivability as well as damage. Next is the Longsword. Again, you cannot guard with the Longsword, so your survivability will depend heavily on your evasion and counters. If you're very good at timing your counters, you can drop evade windows entirely for more damage, but since Longsword is not too decoration hungry, you will more than likely have the luxury of adding some evade window anyways. If you have additional decoration slots, you can always reduce your sheath time by a few milliseconds by adding in Quick Sheath. It's not huge, but if there isn't anything else to add, then might as well. Next up is the Hammer and the Hunting Horn. I'm going to talk about both these weapons simultaneously for their defensive options, as they are very similar. Both weapons lack a guard, so make the core defensive option evasion. The key difference is the hammer also has a charging mechanic for players to charge up their attacks. Unlike the greatsword, you do not need to prioritize the focus decoration, as you are able to freely reposition during the charging process. Instead of focus decoration, I'd put the focus on positioning for punishing openings after monster attacks. Finally, a weapon that can make use of the guard playstyle, the lance. Given its massive shield, it should be very obvious on its playstyle. The lance's counter options out of guarding allows the weapon to stay unsheathed the entire time. If you plan on playing the lance, it'll be very important to grab a health augment, as you will be able to regenerate the chip damage that you take the entire time that you guard attacks. The most important decoration, more important than the guard decoration, is the guard up decoration. It should be your highest defensive priority for any guard-based playstyle, as it will allow you to guard against attacks that are normally unguardable. Later on, players are able to drop some guard decorations for certain hunts, as they obtain more defense from upgrading gear and are able to sustain themselves off health augment alone. Next up is the gun lance. Oh look, another weapon with a large shield. If you're thinking that we use the guard playstyle for the gun lance, you're horribly mistaken. Almost every gun lance set in the upper echelons of gun lance gameplay revolve around evasion, as the guard option lacks any meaningful follow-ups. Instead, you will see players reposition with evade extender, making use of its fast repositions and back hops to weave tightly in and out of attacks. If you plan on trying out this style, then getting at least evade extender 2 will be necessary. Might as well get that mod that makes the shield invisible, because it is only used under the same oh shit situation as the greatsword. Switch axe players. Just look at what I said for hammer and hunting horn. I hate repeating myself. There isn't much to add anyways. I guess I can milk this section by adding some cool switch axe gameplay here. If you're having trouble surviving, try maxing Tool Specialist and slapping on your temporal and rocksteady mantle onto your set. Combined with your health augment, you should be able to face tank almost 100% of all attacks with 0 skill discharge alone, unless you're horribly undergeared. Okay, let's get back on the guard discussion. The Charge Blade is probably the most complex weapon to gear up. This is due to the wide range of defensive options that players have access to, with guard points on certain attacks, and a reliance on evasion while in Savage Axe mode. As a general rule of thumb for Charge Blade, evasion is a good option to go for regardless of the matchup, but you can drop some evasion for guard and offensive guard for a more guard-heavy playstyle. For example, I would invest a bit more heavily into evasion for Fatalis, as his fireball will absolutely destroy my health, even with a max level guard. While I might put some points into guard and offensive guard for a hunt like Zinogre, whose fast and frequent strikes make it hard to make full use of Savage Axe. Next weapon is going to be the Insect Glaive. The defensive options for Insect Glaive are mostly evasion focused because, as those with average IQ and above may have noticed, the glaive is quite lacking in a shield. However, an important asset to the glaive's defensive options also rely on its aerial movement and mobility. For certain attacks, you are able to fly over the hitboxes by pogo sticking into the air. If you plan on staying in the air for an entire sequence of attacks, which I cannot comprehend why you would, a point or two into Constitution will be beneficial for your dodging and mobility in the long run. Since you're also going to be buzzing around like a mosquito, the airborne decoration will be a great asset to your longevity. Now, for the best part, ranged weapons. I'm going to go over the bow and the light bowgun together, since these weapons are also similar in terms of defensive options. Spoiler alert, they also use evasion as their main source of defense. If players are getting hit by too many attacks, I would recommend slotting in evade extenders instead of damage, and slowly swap back into damage as they become more accustomed to dodging attacks and reading animations. Evade extender will also provide a good crutch for bad positioning, as you're able to leave a bad position much easier. Last but not least, heavy bowgun. Heavy bowguns have the option to add up to 3 shield custom mods onto heavy bowguns, allowing it to block attack while not shooting. However, there are no heavy bowgun speedrunners who will advocate for the use of shield mods, as it takes away from damage mods. Instead, heavy bowguns will often use the evasion window, supplemented with evade extender to remove the need to sheath the weapon. If you are having trouble left clicking hard enough, I recommend some Eurobeat and a Rocksteady Mantle, so you can tank the occasional hit as you meet the damage threshold for flinching monsters. And that's all the weapons and their defensive options once you reach the sweat level. I will not recommend trying these options unless you want to really push yourself, but if you do, try starting off by throwing in some Divine Blessings as you get accustomed to your new playstyle. And feel free to change bits and pieces as you see fit. I wish everyone luck on their carts, and I will see you all next time.